Ethan buys a rental property. Noah invests in index funds. Same starting cash, same income, same city, same goal: build wealth. One of them wants leverage. The other wants simplicity. One wants an asset he can walk through. The other wants an asset he never has to think about. And after 20 years, both of them end up with real money. But the path they take, the stress, the risk, the time, and the flexibility looks completely different. Because the real question is not just which one makes more money, it's what does that money cost you to build? So today, let's run the numbers carefully and compare real estate and index funds in a way most people don't. Not with hype, not with ideology, just with math, trade-offs, and reality. Let's make this fair. Ethan and Noah are both 35 years old. They both earn $72,000 a year. They've each saved $60,000. Neither one is a finance genius, neither one is broke. They're just disciplined enough to finally do something smart with their money. Ethan uses his $60,000 as a down payment and closing cost cushion on a $300,000 rental property. It's a solid 3-bedroom home in a decent area, not luxury, not a disaster, just a normal rental. He puts 20% down, finances the rest with a 30-year mortgage, and gets a tenant paying $2,050 a month. Noah takes the same $60,000 and puts it into a broad index fund portfolio. Then he automates $450 a month into that account and decides he's not going to obsess over every market move. So right away, Ethan feels like he's doing something bigger. He has a house, a tenant, a mortgage, a rent payment coming in. There's something emotionally powerful about that. Noah, meanwhile, has a brokerage account and a bunch of numbers on a screen. There's no front door to unlock, no property to drive past, no story that sounds impressive at dinner. And that matters more than people admit, because in the beginning, real estate often feels richer than stocks. For the first year, Ethan looks like the guy who made the bold move. Every month, rent comes in, and on paper, the spread looks promising. He starts telling himself the tenant is paying off his house. He likes the idea that he controlled a $300,000 asset with only a fraction of that in cash. That's the magic of leverage. Ethan didn't buy a $60,000 investment. He bought control of a much larger one. And when home values rise, that leverage can amplify returns. Noah doesn't get that same emotional payoff. His account goes up some months, down other months, sideways on others. Nothing about it feels dramatic. Nobody sees it. Nobody congratulates him. Nobody asks to tour his index fund. He just keeps buying. And that's why a lot of people underestimate stock investing early on. It doesn't look exciting. It doesn't feel productive. It doesn't produce a story. But boring and ineffective are not the same thing. Now let's talk about the gap between gross rent and actual profit, because this is where beginner real estate math starts falling apart. Ethan isn't just collecting rent and keeping the difference. He has property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, vacancy risk, turnover costs, and eventually major replacements. Maybe the first few months are smooth, then the dishwasher fails, then a tenant moves out, then there's repainting, cleaning, and a week or two of lost rent while he fills the place again, and suddenly the easy cash flow looks a lot thinner. This is the trap. People compare rent to the mortgage payment and think that's profit. It isn't. Real estate is a business, and businesses have friction. Even if Ethan manages the place himself, that doesn't make those costs disappear. It just means some of the expense gets paid in his time instead of cash. Phone calls after work, weekend maintenance coordination, contractor follow-up, screening tenants, paperwork, stress. That time has value too. While Ethan is dealing with the physical side of investing, Noah is doing something almost offensively simple. He keeps his money in index funds. He keeps adding to them, and he does almost nothing else. No property issues, no late-night texts, no repair estimates, no single asset in one neighborhood deciding his fate. Instead, Noah owns tiny pieces of many businesses through a diversified fund. His investment doesn't depend on one roof, one tenant, one street, or one zip code. That doesn't mean it's risk-free. The market can fall hard. A crash can make years of gains disappear on paper for a while. But Noah's biggest job is psychological, not operational. His challenge is not fixing things. His challenge is not panicking. That sounds easier than it is, because when the market drops sharply, people who said they were long-term investors suddenly discovered they were only calm during bull markets. So yes, index funds are passive, but passive does not mean effortless emotionally. It just means you're fighting a different battle. By year 3, Ethan has learned what landlord life actually feels like. Some months are fine, some months are annoying. A small issue becomes a medium bill. A medium bill arrives right after a month with no major cash cushion. The property may have appreciated, which helps his net worth on paper, and some of his mortgage balance is getting paid down over time. That part is real. Equity growth matters. But cash flow still isn't as glamorous as people on social media make it sound, because the money doesn't arrive clean. It arrives with friction attached. Noah, meanwhile, still looks unimpressive from the outside, but internally, something important is starting to happen. His original $60,000 is compounding. His monthly additions are buying more shares regularly. And over time, the account begins to grow, not just from what he contributes, but from returns generating more returns. That's the hidden engine of index investing. At first, it feels slow. Then one day, you realize the portfolio is doing meaningful work on its own. And that shift is easy to miss because it doesn't happen with a bang. It happens quietly. Let's be fair to Ethan. Real estate has one massive advantage that stock investors usually cannot replicate the same way: leverage. With his cash, Ethan controlled a much larger asset. So if that property rises in value over a decade, the impact on his equity can be powerful. That is not a minor advantage. It's the reason real estate can create strong wealth outcomes, even when monthly cash flow is just okay. If the house goes from $300,000 to $390,000 or $420,000 over time, Ethan benefits from appreciation on the full property value, not just the money he put in. Plus, his tenant is helping service the debt. That combination, appreciation, loan paydown, and rental income, is why real estate remains so attractive. But leverage is also a double-edged sword, because when something goes wrong, it goes wrong on a larger base. A vacancy hurts more. A major repair hurts more. A bad financing environment hurts more. A weak local market hurts more. Leverage magnifies outcomes. That's why it can build wealth faster and also create more pressure. Now, let's be fair to Noah. Index funds have a different kind of strength: breadth. Noah's money is not tied to one property, one tenant, one neighborhood, not one local economy. He's spread out. That diversification doesn't eliminate volatility, but it does reduce the danger of a single asset causing permanent damage. And there's another advantage that rarely gets enough attention: flexibility. If Noah needs access to part of his portfolio years from now, he can usually sell some shares. That may not always be ideal, but it's possible. Ethan can't sell the kitchen. He can't sell half a roof. He can't easily access his equity without refinancing, borrowing, or selling the whole property.
Real estate can make you wealthy while also making you less flexible. Index funds can make you wealthy while keeping your life easier to adjust. That difference matters more as life gets complicated.
By year 10, the comparison gets interesting. Ethan likely has meaningful equity built up. The home may be worth much more than when he bought it. He owes less on the mortgage. Rent may also be higher than it was at the start. From a wealth perspective, he's not crazy for choosing real estate. He may be doing very well. But this is also where the hidden cost of his strategy becomes impossible to ignore.
Over 10 years, he didn't just invest money, he invested attention, patience, mental energy, decision-making. Noah's portfolio, on the other hand, may now be large enough that compounding becomes obvious. His monthly contributions still matter, but now the account growth itself is starting to become a major driver.
And here's the surprising part. At the 10-year mark, Ethan and Noah may be much closer in net worth than the internet would lead you to believe. Not identical, not always equal, but close enough that the argument stops being which one is obviously better and starts becoming which lifestyle cost are you willing to pay. That is a much smarter question. Now let's jump to year 20. Ethan may own a property with substantial equity, maybe nearly paid off or fully paid off, depending on the exact path. At that point, rental income can become far more attractive because the debt burden is much smaller. That's where real estate often starts to shine, emotionally and financially. The property feels mature, the asset feels real, the income feels more meaningful, but he spent 2 decades carrying the responsibilities that came with it. Noah, after 20 years of steady investing, may have a portfolio that looks enormous compared to how boring the process felt in the beginning. That's the magic of long compounding periods. It rewards consistency more than excitement. And once again, the outcome may land in the same general wealth neighborhood as Ethan's result, depending on appreciation, market returns, contributions, expenses, and timing. So after all the arguments, after all the debates, after all the online tribalism, the honest answer is frustratingly simple. Both strategies can work. Real estate may be the better choice if you want more control. If you like evaluating deals, improving properties, managing risk actively, and using financing strategically, real estate can reward that skill. It may also fit people who want an asset they can influence directly. You can raise rents, renovate, improve operations, choose locations carefully, build a portfolio over time. For the right person, that's a feature, not a burden. Real estate can also make sense for people comfortable with illiquidity and operational headaches in exchange for leverage and tangible ownership. But if you hate admin, hate surprise expenses, and hate dealing with people, then owning rentals may turn into a second job you never meant to apply for. Index funds may be the better choice if you value simplicity, automation, and freedom. If your career is demanding, your schedule is full, or you just don't want your investments calling you on a Saturday, index funds are extremely hard to beat on convenience. They also work well for people who are willing to be patient and disciplined without needing constant activity. That last part matters, because many people say they want passive investing, but what they really want is entertainment. And index funds are not entertaining. They are repetitive, which is exactly why they're so effective for people who can stay consistent. The biggest mistake isn't choosing real estate, and it isn't choosing stocks. The biggest mistake is choosing either one based on slogans. Real estate is the fastest way to wealth. The stock market always wins. passive income solves everything. Landlords get rich. Just buy index funds and forget it. All of those statements contain some truth, and all of them are incomplete.
Because the real math only becomes useful when it includes everything: the money, the time, the stress, the flexibility, the debt, the behavior, and the years required to make the strategy work. That's what people skip. Ethan and Noah did not choose between a good option and a bad option. They chose between two valid paths with different costs. And that's how most big money decisions actually work in real life.
So if someone asks you whether real estate or index funds is better, the honest answer is, better for what? Better for who? Better under which conditions? Because if you only measure the final number, you miss half the story. And if you only measure convenience, you miss the other half. Wealth is not just about what you earn. It's about what you have to become to earn it.
Join the conversation. Subscribe to stay updated. Like if you agree. Comment your thoughts below.